Joe.
Full house. He's going to try and get the cooler on, I think. But it's not. Are we going to get cooler on?
Outside the door.
Cool. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a Crystal Meth
Hi,
Anonymous.
Joe.
This room's full again. Who's here for the very first time tonight? Anybody? Very good. First of all, welcome. And second, just so that you know, what we do here is perhaps a little different than what you've experienced in other fellowship meetings. We go through the instructions for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book and Crystal Meth Anonymous. Why?
Because they work.
The 12 steps have already been proven that they work by these people's experience. Does that make sense? These guys are a working model, a laboratory of how these 12 steps work, and their experience is recorded in this book. So what we do here at Position of Neutrality is I try and show you how I find my experience in this book and encourage you to have your experience with this book. And if we both do our jobs, we share a spiritual experience in every meeting. If you don't believe me, ask some of the people who come regularly. And that we really get to understand that in recovery, in 12-step recovery, we have a real solution. And it's not about what I don't do. It's about what's done for me and how I grow in consciousness of that. Does that make sense? Okay, the next thing I want you to look at, because we're in step 1 tonight, assume you don't know that you're an addict or an alcoholic and you just happened in here. It helps to not pretend we know everything there is to know when we start. And to set you off just a little bit, many of you that have come to this meeting for a while now, I'm going to go through the step differently than I have in the past. And so you'll have a different experience. The reason we use this book and the reason we like to go through and show people what I was shown is, if you'll go to the forward to your first edition in your book, I helped you with a couple of things about why this meeting came to be. The beginning of that forward, it tells us who we is. How many of you have been in the fellowship for a while and you've heard it said that we are we? If you've been in the fellowship a while, you've probably heard that. That's not who we is. And they're going to tell us who we is, and then they're going to tell us who we are collectively here. But the we there is not us. Okay? So it says here, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So you might want to ask yourself if you would like to recover. Not being a recovering whatever, recover. And there's no doubt about it. It's not semantics. It's not an argument. This is their experience. They describe the experience. They tell us what it is. And the reason you can't convince anyone else, because it isn't semantic, it's an experience. The experience of being recovered. And I'm going to show you what they say about that tonight, and I'll describe it to you in my own experience and then encourage you to have your experience with it. Does that make sense? So the reason we do this meeting is, notice it said to show others precisely how they recovered. The purpose of this book is to show others precisely how they recovered. And so other people who have been shown this showed me. They sat down with this book and they showed me how to find my experience in this book so I could show others. Does that make sense? And then they also showed me in their walk. They said, walk with me and I'll show you precisely how I recovered. Does that make sense? Which is why we encourage sponsorship here, because it's not about you subjecting yourself to a sponsor. It's about you honoring a sponsor with an opportunity to serve you in the walk. It helps to realize the roles here. We wash each other's feet. Okay? All right. Then it goes on to say, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. Which is why we use this book. To show people how to recover. Okay? All right? So, I want to jump from there to the title of the book real quick. A lot of people just call it the big book. But more importantly, for our purposes, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. The 12 steps are used in a number of fellowships, so whatever it is you want to recover from, whether it's codependency, gambling, whatever drug addiction. We'll show you what that is too, okay? I'm going to start in Bill's story. I'm not going to go through the traditional way tonight. Go to page 5 of Bill's story. I've never gone through this step, singularly or collectively, and not had a shitty experience. So if you came here tonight hoping to have a good experience, if you do your job, we'll probably have some lows and some highs. Does that make sense? Because powerless and unmanageable is not a happy experience. See what I'm saying? Okay. So let's start, top of page 5, first paragraph. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. How many of you remember when it was no longer a matter of, I want to go use, it was a matter of, God, I have to go. I got to go do the hustle. I got to drag out. Anybody? Okay. Okay. And it doesn't really matter what the chemical is we're addicted to. It's the experience, right? Okay. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I'd pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. Any of you relate to that?
Oh, yeah.
Go out and hustle, pay up, get back on the hook. Huh? Okay. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. Anybody relate to him?
Yes.
A tumbler of gin, or tumbler full of gin, followed by a half dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. How many drinkers do I have here? Remember that experience?
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Any of you remember that experience?
Yep.
And we think we're not insane when we get here.
Nope.
3 bottles of gin a day, it's a necessity. I wake up shaking violently. I can't even hold the liquor down I need to be able to give myself sustenance. But I still thought I could control the situation.
Yep.
Anybody relate to that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. How many of you took some family members with you on the train wreck? Did that help you? Was that a mirror that helped you? Because they get hopeful and, huh? Okay. Gradually, things got worse. Think about that description. Liquor's not a luxury, it's a necessity. I gotta have it. I gotta go out and hustle, and then I pay up all my bills, and then I piss it all away.
Yep.
And gradually, things got worse. Anyone relate to that?
Yeah.
He's talking about an experience, right? Okay. The house was taken over by a mortgage holder, and my mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. How many of you had a really good deal come along that was your salvation, and you went out and had a little pipe load to celebrate? Just a little taste.
Pre-celebration.
Holiday.
I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Any of you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Not even one little drink.
Yeah.
I'm not going to drink no matter what. Not even a little cocaine holiday at Thanksgiving. Nothing. Huh? You're late to him? Okay. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. Remember that one?
Yeah.
After all those sweet promises and firm resolutions? Yeah. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? Do you remember asking yourself that question? How many times?
Many.
I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy?
Yeah.
How many of you feared for your sanity out here? Did it help to have another hit so that thought passed?
Yeah.
I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. How many of you have had that experience? Some recovery time, and confidence replaces cocksureness. The experience of grace gets mistaken for the illusion of control. Have you guys internalized what really happened when that happens? Yeah, it helps that some of you are internalizing it now. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time I was beating on the bar asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I'd manage better next time. But I might as well get good and drunk then.
Heck yeah.
And I did. Any of you relate to that?
Yes.
Shit, we can go get us another chip. Huh? Any of you think you could predict your new sobriety date? Do you have a little complexity with the year? I wanted to set it on a significant date and just couldn't. Yeah, okay. Okay, now he's going to describe the other end of that experience. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. Guys, if you belong here, do yourself a favor, have that experience. Bring it to consciousness, see if you can. How many of you have had one of those dreams where you got loaded and woke up just disgusted with yourself? Scared. So you know that's still there. We don't like to bring that to consciousness, but if we've ever been where he's talking about, we know what it feels like. Remorse, horror, hopelessness. Okay. The courage to do battle was not there. How many of you suspected not only had you pissed away the last chance, but you weren't even going to look for another one?
Yeah.
My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. What was the fear for you? That you would die or you wouldn't?
I wouldn't.
Or was it vacillating? I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. You guys remember that experience? Okay. That was a hard thought. It was, wasn't it? Should I kill myself? How many of you had that thought? Look at his experience. No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Jen would fix that.
Oh, yeah.
Many of you pushed that idea of killing yourself away with just another round of the same old drill.
Yes.
You might want to consider if your experience aligns closely with this Hopeless Alcoholics written 70 years ago. There might be a reason. So 2 bottles and oblivion. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. Any of you ever just hoped that you'd just OD?
Yep.
Sucked to keep waking up? There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor, lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. How many of you started that routine?
Yeah.
A lot of us that are drinkers ended up in the ER, and then we got morphine or we got whatever, and then, anybody? Did you know how to talk them into just the right heavy sedative? This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. That ought to be a familiar story to my CMA friends. Where's my tweakers? Relate to 40 pounds underweight? At least. My brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Guys, we like to think there's accidents and there's lucky things. This guy, Bill Wilson, landed in the only place on the planet he could land at that time with one physician who believed alcoholism an illness and was working in that theory. It was not a medical diagnosis. This was a weird theory by a doctor who treated World War I vets largely. And he treated opiate addicts that came back from the war, and he treated alcoholics. And he believed they were ill. And had Bill not gone there, and he hadn't been placed there, none of us would be here. Sense that? Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that, though certainly selfish and foolish, I'd been seriously ill bodily and mentally. Guys, in the rooms these days, we don't spend enough time trying to explain to people the physical allergy that manifests as a craving beyond my mental control. It's the only fucking way I can use, the way I thought I wanted to use. And if I don't understand that, I can't get well. The authors are very clear about it. Okay? It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. How many of you could put your life back together in other areas? But somehow, when you were using, you couldn't stop, and when you were stopped for some period of time, you couldn't stay stopped. There was no expectation of different results, was there? Okay. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. They're really focusing on the hopeless nature of the malady. Are you getting it? The way I thought I used because I was a better drinker, a better doper than you guys, was the only way I could use. And that combined with my utter inability to leave it alone, regardless of need or desire, because of a diminished will that functioned perfectly well in other areas. That describing anyone but me?
Maybe.
Okay. Just want people to internalize that, because we don't tell people. We hear in the room, Joe, I just don't pick up. That's not my experience. I'm happy for you, but I pick up. No matter fucking what. Okay. And if we don't, it's not about my experience anymore. It's about trying to share with you the truth about my experience so I can help you find yours. See? And this is theirs. And the reason we like you to focus on us not being we is my experience, if it hasn't been brought to my consciousness, might not align with theirs if I haven't done the things they did. So the people that show, I didn't like the idea I'd lost the power of choice when I got here. Anyone else? My sponsor looked at me and he said, Joe, you'll be happy to know that liking it is not a requirement.
Yeah.
But you're not we, and you won't know until you did what they did what your experience really is. If you do what they did, you'll get what they got, and then you'll know who you are. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right, understanding myself, now I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. You know what he means?
Oh, yeah.
Things are looking up.
Yeah.
I don't pick up no matter what. Got a 90-day chip. Probably did my 90 and 90 by now. Huh? And you ever had that experience? Yeah. How many 90 and 90s did you do? I had to start over a lot. I kept going. Okay. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge.
Yep.
How many of you had that experience? Okay. But it was not. How many of you had that experience?
Yeah.
For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. How many of you started having that discovery? Not only did it get worse, but it got worse quick.
Yep.
Anybody have that experience? Yeah. When they said progressive, they weren't freaking kidding, huh? No. Yeah, okay. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain perhaps within a year. Where's my drinkers? You guys relate? Do you understand what the delirium tremens is? Mm-hmm. Those of you that are not drinkers may not know of delirium tremens. Those of you who are tweakers, a very similar thing happens to you on about a 7-day run. Yeah. Where we enter the world of the spirit. There's a lot of beings there, and they're not telling us very useful things. If you've never been there, you don't know. But they're very real to the person in delirium tremens or in that meth holiday I'm describing. Okay. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker of the asylum. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. Relate to that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm dying. Tell me something I don't fucking know. Tell me when's what I want to know. Any of you relate? Yeah. You're such a good physician, just tell me when so I know what I got. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. Then listen to what he describes. It was a devastating blow to my pride. You guys remember that? Man, I ain't going to be able to get up. I always dreamed that at some point I was going to show those people who were so critical of me that they had overreacted. Anybody?
Yep.
And then I finally came to the conclusion that maybe they called it. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. How many of you guys took it to the ragged edge? All right. How many of you in your recovery experience have gone and seen those old addicts die and are damn glad that you found the experience of grace before you got there? Most of us been around any length of time can tell you one or both of those experiences. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. Any of you relate to that? Maybe a mom, maybe a parent, maybe a friend. Somebody kept picking us up. We kept letting them down. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Guys, remember that experience he's describing? He's describing a sensory experience. It's not a bunch of words. He's talking about what it feels like to not only know I've let down everyone who ever cared about me, but there's not a fucking thing I can do about it. Anybody get there?
Oh, yeah.
Some of you are getting there. Sorry for the experience, honey, but this is the experience. Okay. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. See, guys, powerless is not a theory. It's an experience. And until we have this experience and get some good information that nothing's different's going to happen, no matter what I do, unless I have a very different experience, then I'm not going to seek the experience required for me to get well. Does that make sense? Okay. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Any of you get sobered for a bit on fear? That's a common experience. Okay. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. Guys, he described to you 2 treatments, and then the beginning of his last run, and then he's going to describe a 3rd treatment. How many of you have had more than one run at this gig? The guy that wrote the majority of this book had 3 goes in treatment before he latched on to the spiritual solution. So you can be forgiven if you've had some difficulties. We don't say it enough. Do not be discouraged. Okay? Whatever it is you're trying to overcome, the power in you will allow you to overcome it. Just, you keep not giving up. Don't be discouraged. Okay? I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the 4th dimension of existence. Guys, we sometimes tell people there's no hope in the first step. That's not true. The first step is vacillating between no hope and nothing but hope. We're going to walk you through the next side of the experience now. Okay? All right? I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Bill discovered that recovery was every bit as progressive as illness.
Yep.
Once we get a wellness strategy that's not based on me.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected that there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. Where's my drinkers? How many of you guys are hiders?
Yeah.
You guys that aren't drinkers, you don't get us, but we had booze hidden everywhere, in the car. And the other thing about drinkers is we don't know what to do with the fucking empties.
Yep.
We got bottles in the hedges, we got them everywhere. Anybody?
Yeah.
Am I lying? They clank, and they're really hard to get rid of, you know. It's a complex deal, man. All right. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by a telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. Look at that's in italics. His old school friend that he's going to talk about. How many of you guys had a dude that you ran with that no matter how bad it got for you, at least I'm not that bad yet? That's who heavy was for him. I ain't that bad yet. And so look at how it's astonishing that this cat's sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Any of you ever run into somebody who you knew their patterns and all of a sudden they were well? Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Probably still got the bracelets on, right? Okay. Of course he'd have dinner and then I could drink openly with him, unmindful of his welfare. I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. You guys relate to that? Mm-hmm. I got a wife out of the house. I got some booze stashed. I'm going to get hammered. I'm going to have a friend to shoot the shit with. And I don't give a shit if he's sober.
Yeah.
More for me. Relate?
Yeah.
Besides that, he'll give in and take a drink from me.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis.
Yes.
You guys ever catch a little bright spot in your depths of your addiction and had plenty of dope and someone to shoot the shit with and it's all going to be good? Huh? You relate to it? Okay. Drinkers are like that. Notice how we're 12-stepping you, me and Bill? If your experience relates to this guy, both things are possible. On to the end in that terrible procession of sots and recovered, rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence. What do you want?
Yeah.
Hopelessness or hope? Can't take one without rejecting the other.
Yeah.
Ain't no choice. See what he's saying? Okay. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. How many of you have seen people come in here tore up Somebody's worked with them, and the next time you see them, they're just unmistakably different. It's an experience to behold, isn't it? Okay. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? Did it surprise you when you saw it? How many of you got to admit you're around here and you still sometimes pick them? There ain't no way that dude's getting well. And then they show up, fresh skinned and glowing, and you're like, I'll be damned. Anybody?
Never get it right.
Okay. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed, but curious, I wondered what had got into that fellow. He wasn't himself. Huh. Why the fuck won't he take my drink? Come, what's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, I've got religion. Wow. That would cause the old heart to murmur a bit, huh? Where's my atheists and agnostics? Oh, shit. I hope I got a lot of gin. Huh? Better check for another bottle. All right. I was aghast, so that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. I mean, the old prejudice comes up. Anyone that's ever had that religious prejudice knows what he's talking about. And the thing is, Bill's telling you what he was like. He's about to describe what happened, and then he'll describe what he's like now. And what I like you to get is, if you came here with religious prejudice, you ain't any worse off than Bill. Because he's telling you how he thought. Okay? All right. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. Think of what he's saying. This is the guy who's worse than me. I know I'm going to the undertaker or to the asylum soon, and I don't care. Not soon enough for me. But this guy's worse than me, and he's sitting here. And not only is he sober, but he ain't preaching about it. He's confident about it. He's good. He's 60 days sober, guys. 60 days. How many of you have been told you don't sponsor anyone until you're a year sober? It's a good thing these people didn't think that way. And I'm going to show you why that is here in a minute. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I would have it. Pause for a minute. Evie's only 60 days sober. He doesn't have a lot of knowledge. Notice it said he didn't come to pass his knowledge on to Bill. He came to pass his experience on to Bill. It's a difference.
Yep.
So then it says, I was shocked but interested. How many of you are shocked but interested? An experience. I like experiences. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the Spears really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. How many of you relate to that? Your exposure to religion was somewhat minimal. You'd been around church but never been attracted to it. You'd had relatives that had a good life, were good people. They poked fun at some religious people that got into some shit. Any of you relate to that kind of a life? That was Bill. That's who he was, how he thought. Does that make sense? What I was like. Okay. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. You know what he's talking about? Earlier in his story, he talked about looking at a tombstone just before he goes in. And he's reading about an old soldier who drank himself to death. And he was about ready to go into battle, in one of the bloodiest battles in human history. And he was pretty scared. And he thought if there was a God, maybe he ought to check in. And he describes that experience. I'd always believed in a power greater than myself. I'd often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? Have you ever pondered that question? I don't know why everything is the way it is, but I don't believe it can be proven that some deity is in control of that. Anyway, see what he's describing? Okay. I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation. But that was as far as I had gone. With ministers in the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Do you relate to Bill now? Bill is going to describe to you how he and the first 100 recovered and their experience with the first several thousand who recovered, and that they had to keep up in that total all the way to present day. So this is a really good idea, if that's you, to pay attention, because again, knowledge doesn't mean much and past experience doesn't mean much. If I get here, I need a new experience, and that's what he described. Does that make sense? Okay. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. Have you noticed that? Some very unloving behavior by people claiming, okay. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. Relate to that? I can do the shit that's relatively easy, and anything they don't want me to do that I want to do, I just disregard. Right? Okay. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and the chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether on balance the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I'd seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. This guy was coming out of World War I. He had been in Wall Street. Said if there was a loving God, he sure as hell hadn't shown himself to me. How many of you can relate to that in your addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed boss universal, and he certainly had me. How many of you figured if there is a God and there is this other thing, I've already made that deal a long time ago? Knowingly or unknowingly. That's where Bill was. Okay. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. How many of you admitted? Notice that doesn't say we admitted we were addicts. Much higher standards. We admitted we were powerless. Big difference, huh? Okay. Then he's going to describe for you the difference between recovered and recovering. So you'll understand. If you haven't had this experience, it's probably because you didn't do what these people did. If you have had this experience, I'll describe to you what it's like in some other matters. Okay? It says, then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. The difference between recovered and recovering is that experience. I died in my addiction. I stand before you a dead man. And then I was lifted from that scrap heap and raised to a level of life better than the best I ever known. And I now walk with that God that animates me, and I exercise that healing power that flows through me. And it's not some mystical force. It's the power to love the unlovely. It's the power to be patient with the impatient. It's the power to tolerate the intolerable. That's what it is. And it flows through me, and every time I get faced with a situation, I get the grace to get through that situation, and when that situation passes, I get to keep the grace.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's progressive. Do you understand what I'm talking to you about?
Yes.
It's not bullshit. It's not words on a wall. It's an experience. And it's not semantics. Okay? Had this power originated in him? I just told you who I was. I had no power to stop. Anyone else? I couldn't even get dead right. I didn't have power to do that. Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and this was none at all. That floored me. When this was explained to me, I was dumbfounded. Because I didn't even comprehend it, but I knew it. Any of you can't comprehend it, but know it?
Yes.
Okay. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. Because he knew the man. And that man was the mirror. Why do you think we sponsor here? Because you're the mirror. When you recover, I recognize the miracle of my own. You honor me with a reflection of the miracle of my life. You understand that? Okay. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasp a new soil. How many of you can relate to that? Completely. How many of you had some recovery experience, but not this experience, then had this experience, and you knew it was never going to be the same again?
Yes. Yes.
And you were right, weren't you? Okay. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vestiges of my old prejudice. How many of you are sitting there going, yeah, all that shit's nice, but I don't like those religious people. Right? Okay, that was him. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. Okay, it's not pissing me off anymore, I just don't give a shit. We'll ignore that. You relate? We'll put that God thing on the side. God is just a power that we call the sensory experience that enables us to recover in AA. You'll give that power a name. You will, eventually. If you do all the things they suggest, you'll give that power a name, but it isn't up to us to tell you the name. It lives in you. Call it anything you want. Just look in the right place. Make sense? Okay. All right. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. How many of you can relate to that? How many of you have been through a second step experience and you know why that feeling was intensified? How much more personal to me can the experience of God be than emanating through me?
Yes.
How many of you can relate to looking outside of your life for those things that were going to make you happy all your life?
Yep.
New house, new job, new relationship of any kind, new drug. I was looking in the wrong place all along.
Yep.
It's not hard to believe a personal relationship once I realized the experience. God is the subject of experience, not the object of belief. That's what they're trying to tell us. Does that make sense? Okay. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or the spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. So whatever you got going on in your mind, that's not going to matter if you're willing to get honest in the experience you have when you do the things that they suggest you do. And if you don't want to do them, don't do them till you're reasonable. Okay? Okay. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Doesn't matter what God you came here believing in. It obviously wasn't working very well for you. You wouldn't be here on a Thursday night. Right? At least not early. You might be here now seeking to do something different. But the point is we all forget, don't we?
Yes.
How many of you thought that something external to you was causing your suffering today? Happens. Okay. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. Guys, the next step says, I came to believe that a power greater than myself. We got a step that says, come to believe. You'll notice that doesn't say God either. It would really help if you suffer from addiction and you relate to this experience, that you come to believe that the chemicals are a power greater than you because of my illness. Does that make sense? Because I'm never going to seek AA's solution until it's the last fucking solution. Because we don't like AA's path. It's not Joe's path. Joe tried all of his paths. They brought me to AA's. I ain't met anyone that likes it. Self-searching, leveling of pride, confession of shortcomings. But that's what works to take ownership of who and what I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? That's for you to answer. That's for you to answer. Because you're not going to like our path.
Nope.
But you deserve to be told truthfully what that path is, and you deserve to be encouraged by the truth of my experience and Bill's. I didn't like the fucking path. At some of these I balked. I thought I could find an easier, softer way. I went out and gave it a run. I suffered.
Yep.
And then I went through the experience and I discovered that what I thought were the obstacles in my path were the path. Any of you had that experience? Yes. Okay. But we need to tell people the truth. Because if they belong here, the things we tell them because we're people pleasers are killing people. Just don't drink. Come to our meetings and sit here for 90 days and it'll all be good. If you're like me, you're going to die in that solution.
Yep.
I'm not trying to poke fun. I'm trying to save lives, and I'm trying to encourage you to do the same thing. We've got to tell them the truth. We have the power to tell the truth, even at the chance that you might not like me for that truth, because I have no right to watch you die in your addiction because I'm a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to say, have cake, sit down and come back tomorrow. There may not be a tomorrow if you're like me. Okay? All right. Thus I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want Him enough. At long last I saw, I felt, I believed. See how he's describing a sensory experience? And that is the experience to move forward. I'm not going to go any further than that with that experience. What I want to do next is go to, see, it's probably about page 24, isn't it? How about 25? Top that first, see where it says there is a solution? Because we're going to run out of time, but you get a sense of what we really should be telling the new guy. There is a solution. And the solution isn't in the rooms. That's a lie. The solution is in you, and in you, and in you, and in you, and in you. The only solution for you is in you, and it's not of you. Does that make sense to you? And if you're not told that truth, you'll never know. And you don't have to agree with me. That's just their experience, but it's mine too when I align mine with theirs. Okay? Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. God doesn't require it of me. The fellowship doesn't require it of me. The process of me getting to know me requires it of me, because once I knew me, I got free of me, and by getting free of me, I got to be me, which is all I ever wanted to be. You understand? Huh? I can't. Seriously?
One shot.
It's not me talking. What I'm trying to tell you, I'm not lying to you when I tell you I stand before you a dead man. The power who animates me, that inspires you, is not me. You don't have to believe me, but I'm just telling you who I am in my experience with this power. Okay? But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we'd been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up this simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We've found much of heaven, and we've been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence which we had not even dreamed. Guys, I draw your attention again to the first step instructions. The most important words in that sentence are not powerless and unmanageable. They're were and had. I am no longer powerless, and my life is no longer unmanageable. It's the experience of being recovered. I have power. I have access to a power greater than me, and that power manages my life. And I try and keep conscious of that fact through spiritual discipline, which AA taught me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Have a good evening.